stick of Nick Leclerc in the other way. John Leclerc will blast. Score! There it is! John Leclerc's 50th goal this season. He becomes the first American-born NHL player with 3 50-goal seasons, and he beats the Dominator to do it. There are the lists. The first American-born with 3. The second Flyer, Tim Kerr, the other. 13th NHL player to have 3 consecutive 50-goal seasons. He's being mobbed by his teammates. He has been tremendous at putting that puck in the net, and he just beat the best in the business to get his 50th. How do you beat that?
Hey everybody, it's Isaiah. Just reminding you that FlyersNittyGritty.com and the O&B Puckcast are brought to you by Summit Public Adjusters. Hey, do you have damage to your home? Not sure who to call? We suggest that you call Summit Public Adjusters before your insurance company. Dealing with your insurance company can be very stressful. Let Summit take the stress out of the claims process. From storm damage to your roof, to toilet overflows, to broken pipes and fires, Summit gets you the most money for your repairs. So next time Mother Nature leaves you in need of repairs, call Summit Public Adjusters at 215-752-0560 or visit summitpublicadjusters.com. Licensed in PA and New Jersey.
And we are back. Yes, it is your host, Isaiah. Welcome to the O&B Puckcast, episode 221, as we begin the 8th season of this Flyers podcast. And again, like we said at the end of the last show, we just want to thank everybody for all the support to get us to this level and to this point. All the listeners, all the followers on our Twitter account at O&B Puckcast. Yeah, thanks. Appreciate it. I want to say thanks to Jamie Bascal from FlyersNittyGritty.com. And we welcome back an old sponsor that has returned. Yes, I'm talking about Jim's South Street, 400 South Street, 40 years of the best cheesesteaks, hoagies, fries, you name it, in the grandest Philadelphia tradition. You know you want it. Your mouth was watering already. Yes, they are back. They've opened their doors. So get yourself down to Jim's South Street, 400 South Street in Philadelphia, PA. Got to check that out when I get back in town. All right. Without any further ado, let's bring the panel on before we bring on our guest. Always to my left is Chef B. How are you? What's the good word, man?
Good, man. I'm enjoying these hockey playoffs. I mean, it's been fun. I mean, everybody's out for blood now. It's second round. If you watched that game last night, how many misconducts were in that game? Like how many 10-minute misconducts? And it still had over half a period to play. So that's good. You got Boston and Florida tonight. That's probably starting off to be fun right now already.
Well, no, that was last night. That was last night.
Boston, Florida was last night.
Yeah.
All right.
Remember,
who's tonight?
No,
Rangers tonight. Rangers and Canes tonight. That's what I was late. Yeah. So that's going to be. It's good. It's been awesome hockey. It's been really competitive, really fun. Starting to get a little gnarly and nasty. So we love that. So, but yeah. So other than that, I think we got to savor this because this is our taste of hockey here in Philadelphia until I guess we get the draft because. We didn't win the draft lottery. In fact, that's the first time in 10 years it hasn't moved since, or maybe even longer than that, 14 years maybe, since 2010, right? Yeah.
Yeah, we'll get into that. We'll definitely get into that. Back onto the stage, the great Dan Silver.
Boom.
Yeah, right. Yeah. I was saying before we came on, I got a new computer. It doesn't seem to be working like with my Wi-Fi. I've gotten booted off a few times, so I'll have to figure that out. But I'm on a little jetpack from Verizon, so hopefully it'll hold up. I'm excited for the draft. I'm excited. We got Steve on. He's the man. He's going to help us figure out who the Flyers are going to take. And yeah, everything's good.
All right, great. Yeah. Without any further ado, from the draft analyst at Substack.com. Did I get that right, Mr. Steve Kournianos?
Yeah, yes, you did. Of course. Thank you.
Yes. As Chef referred to earlier, the draft went chalk. I mean, for the first time in 10 years, where you finish in the standings basically is where you ended up in the draft lottery, at least for the first 16 picks, which were the ones we're going to concentrate on tonight. So that means the Flyers stayed at number 12. And of course, they have a later pick, which is going to be owned by the Florida Panthers. Depending on how deep they go in the playoffs, will determine how high or low that particular first round draft pick is. And that one could be in play, and we'll get into that a little bit. But the reason we have Steve on tonight is he has published his final rankings for his first 15 or 16 players. We'll want to review those players. And then, of course, we're going to take a look at what might be available in the range of the Flyers, pending, of course, no deals or anything like that. So, Steve, I'm going to give it to you. Talk about this class maybe in general. And I see the rankings are all over after Celebrini. I mean, there's a disparate, spread of opinion on these guys. So what do you think?
Well, it's similar to what we saw in 2022, where, we didn't know, we thought Shane Wright was going to be the number one overall pick, and then it kind of shifted. So even though the narrative changed towards Slafkovsky because he had that dominant world championship, we still didn't know what, let's say, 2 through 32 was going to look like and everything else thereafter. So the good thing about this year's draft was we knew coming in that it was going to be a defense-heavy, let's say, first round, similar to what we saw in 2018 and before that 2012, but that the very top of the draft was going to be a forward. And some felt it was going to be a race between Cole Eiserman on the NTDP and Celebrini on Boston University, and maybe even Demidov, the Russian kid. And Celebrini basically within like a matter of like weeks ended that discussion and solidified the number one pick. We're talking way back in like October. So ever since then, it's like, who's going to be number two? And here we are. And you like I said, you look at Central Scouting's rankings, you look at some of the public rankings. Bob McKenzie's post-lottery list came out. It's really, he even said himself that scouts are pretty much divided on what the draft is going to look like after Celebrini. So San Jose won the lottery. Good for them. It's the first time in their history that they did so. They're going to take Celebrini. But after that, really have no idea. So, as someone who's been doing mock drafts for like 10, 11 years now, this is the one where I don't feel like I'm going to get as many questions, than I have in the past, because literally nobody really knows how things are going to wind up. And I tried my best shot. I know I always go off of NHL potential. I look at the players when they're 24, 25, or try to think what they'll be at 24 or 25 instead of what they're doing exactly at this moment, or try to predict what the draft is going to look like in round one. So my rankings might be a little bit different than a consensus out there or consolidated list, but it really is confusing. It wasn't easy. The only way to really try to hammer out the rankings is to just watch these kids every day for 11 months. And that's where we're still at that point right now.
Yeah. One thing that, and Dan, we'll get to you in just a second. One thing that Bob McKenzie did say, because he really has an inventory of what the teams are thinking.
Yeah.
It seems as if, even though they're all over the place, there does seem to be a core of 15 or 16 players that were consistently on that list. And then it kind of drops off after that. Would you say that's how you feel about it as well, or?
There's a second tier that I think the second tier after Celebrini is pretty strong, and it's deep. I would say even maybe like Bob McKenzie said, maybe like 12 to 15 players deep. Whereas if I said a name like, let's say, I don't know, like Linus Eriksson, right? You don't consider him a top 10 caliber pick, and you don't see him getting drafted, let's say, in the top 15. But if I said, Konsta Helenius, if I said Sam Dickinson, if I said Berkeley Catton, if I said, Michael Nygaard, if I said Cole Eiserman, like these are all the names that you could see him either at 3 or 4. You're going to see him at 13 or 15. So I agree with that. But it's a pretty good second tier. It's a good solid second tier. I don't think it's nowhere near what we saw last year. But it's I would say an average draft class with a really good number 1 overall pick. That's basically and defense heavy.
Gotcha. Dan?
Yeah. So Steve, it's great having you on, man. Your insights, your insights are always fantastic, and they're always kind of like a little different than the norm. I know you put in a lot of work. One question I had just looking at your rankings was a couple guys that a number of folks have ranked a lot higher. So I've seen, obviously everyone's got Celebrini 1. It seems like a lot of folks have 2, 3 as a combination of either Ivan Demidov, who you've got 3rd, and Levshinov, the defenseman from Michigan State, who I see you've got down at 14. So I was just curious, and also Zane Parekh, who a lot of people have maybe top 5, top 6, you've got at 15. And it's, there's so many good defensemen in this draft. The main ones are, Anton Silyev, who you've got 2nd, and Zev Buim, and then Dickinson, Yakemchuk, Levshinov, and Parekh. It's kind of like a big 6 of defensemen. So with Levshinov down as far as you have him, talk a little bit about that, and then also how you see like those 6 defensemen sort of like overall.
Dan came in really broken. I think I caught that he wants me to expound on my Levshinov ranking. Is that correct?
Yeah, that and the group of like these 6 defensemen, how you see them.
So basically, I did a preseason list in April of 23, and I had in that list Levshinov and Dickinson and Boyum. They were all in that mix, and Yakemchuk and Levshinov were my 2 highs. I didn't have Salayev. Boyum I had around 12 or 13. And then as the season progressed, when you have Levshinov and Boyum having these fantastic freshman seasons in college, I had to maintain my Levshinov ranking, but I had to give Boyum a bump. But then Salayev is the one that really threw a wrench into everything, because I had to make him the highest ranked defenseman of everybody, because you basically have a top 4 defenseman in the KHL playing regular minutes. And he deserved it. He was like just a smothering defensive defenseman. My issue with Levshinov was always the defensive side, that he always had bad starts. And I saw him about 10 to 12 times. And he would always have a rough start in a breakout pass, a rough start with coverage. But the good news is that he'd always pick it up at the end. But because of that, always seeing it, I take notes every game. That's the one constant, that he has bad starts. He turns pucks over, but the skating, the size, the puck protection, the offensive ability is very, and the IQ was actually very high in late stages of games. Whereas Boyum, take away his World Junior, I didn't think he was all that good at the World Junior. His season with Denver, wire to wire, was just fantastic. To a degree, Dickinson as well. So I had to punish 2 defensemen because all these forwards were rising, right? Tidja Ginla was rising. Hellenius was rising for me. Nygaard was rising. He wasn't even on my list. My preseason. Lidstrom was rising. So I had to punish 2 defensemen, and the defensemen who were punished were basically Yakemchuk by about 4 spots, but Levshinov was the biggest faller, and it all had to do with the viewings and the poor starts.
Okay, gotcha. Chef?
So let's get to the meat of it. If the Flyers are going to be picking somewhere, all right, obviously, let's just say they stay at 12. Now, they obviously have 2 big needs, center and a number 1 defenseman.
Yeah.
What do you feel like that is easier for them to address in maybe like a trade, or what's easier to address in a draft? I mean, I'm guessing they'll probably draft a center and then go for maybe a more seasoned defenseman that they can like have grow into that role, or am I wrong? I mean, because we obviously didn't want to get started here if you listen to any of the rumors about Michkov, but in 2 years, let's just say he's going to be here. and you want all the wheels turning at once. So do you take a chance and go on that center right now and hope that he's ready in 2 years, or the defensemen that usually take about 3 or 4 years to groom?
It's a good question. So you guys, I think, remember there was a rumor going around that it might have been O'Connor that said it on Twitter that the Flyers were intending to draft Reinbacher, but that Montreal was told by Michkov he didn't want to play for them, or there was an issue there. And so the Flyers basically had to, I don't want to say settle for Michkov, but Montreal had no choice but to take Reinbacher, the defenseman. And Michkov told Arizona he's not playing for them, so they took Salayev, or they took what's his name, the kid from Loco Yaroslav. I forgot his name already. And Simashev. And the Flyers ended up with Michkov. So if that was true, that the Flyers were looking at the right shot defenseman, they didn't get the one they wanted, so they took Michkov. And then with the second first-round pick, they took the right shot defenseman. Then clearly the Flyers acknowledged that in a way that they want to improve the defense. And oh, by the way, they trade their best prospect after Michkov to get a right shot defenseman in Jamie Drysdale. So clearly the organization, during their meetings with all the staff, they identified the defense as a problem. And we saw a lot of the guys that they drafted in recent years, they weren't retained. They're stuck in Lehigh Valley. And the left side was I guess, stronger or deeper than the right side. And last year they took 3 right shot defensemen in Southern, Bonk, and Mann. So although there are several elite right shot defensemen available in this draft that might be in the Flyers range, if you go by my rankings, you'll have a couple. If not, if you go by the consensus, that Levshunov and Perek, the 2 big righties, will be off the board. And then that might leave Yakimchuk, or Yakimchuk will go first. Again, this is the part of the problem that we're having is which defenseman do you prefer? As far as the center ice position goes, I think that the big names are going to be mostly gone for the Flyers, except for one, and someone's going to drop. And we've seen top-rated kids drop every year for the last 5-6 years that I could remember, even further than that. Last year, we had Matthew Wood. Now, he wasn't a center, but Matthew Wood was number 4 in Central Scouting. He went to 15. Zach Benson was, in many cases, a top 5 pick. He went to 13. And Buffalo jumped all over him, and the kid played in the freaking NHL this year. 2 years ago, you had Joachim Kamel going to 17. Luca Del Belbaluz was the 8th rated on Central Scouting, a center. And he went like in the 2nd round. So there's going to be someone that's going to fall. And I don't know who's going to fall, and I don't know why. They could say Hellenius because of his size. They could say Lidstrom because of his injuries and his lack of let's say, his low assist total. I don't know. But the Flyers, in my opinion, should not go for need. That you're picking 12th overall. You have 1 extra first-round pick and 2 second-round picks, right? You have don't you have Columbus's, right? So that's a high second.
Yeah.
Columbus can roll it over to next year if they want to.
Okay, all right.
I don't know when they have to make that decision, but I'm assuming since Columbus's pick's going to be so high in the second, they'll roll it over. But I don't know. But
they still have a mid-second from the compensatory pick from O'Brien. So, like, if you have a late first and a mid-second, then you could address, and this is the draft to address the defense need, because you could find 2 good right shot defensemen or left shot defensemen who play the right side with those later picks. But at 12th overall, I'm not addressing need. I'm going for best player available. I know that the Flyers have an abundance of wings, and you might say, "Oh no, not another wing." But you know, if their scouts say, "Hey, this kid right here, we love him. He interviewed great. He had a great season. He projects really well." I wouldn't mess with fate. I really wouldn't. So, but the last thing I'll say is this: if they viewed Cutter Gauthier as their potential franchise center, he's gone now, and you have to replace that. So absolutely. But, can you do that with a late first? Like history says you can. But, my gut tells me that they're going to go best player available all the way at 12. But it might be a kill two birds with one stone scenario where the best player available for them also addresses a need. So, but it all depends on how their board looks.
Yeah, I'm always reminded.
Well, he was a winger anyway.
Right. That's just right. That was Pierre's little parting comment. No, but I mean, you look at the surfeit of defensemen that Anaheim had. How did they get Gauthier? Because they had other guys. They had who was the kid? The Russian kid.
Zellweger.
Zellweger. They love Zellweger. Right, Michkov, and he was playing so well. So it just that's what happens. I think that's the argument for the best player available. And you can talk to yourself in having need and BPA intersect. Well, we rate centers higher than wingers anyway. Therefore, that's part of our evaluation process. Maybe, I don't know.
Yeah.
But, it's Caden Lindstrom now. He's got a lot of, that's to say, Caden Lindstrom.
Yeah.
He's got a lot of injuries. It's a back injury, and because he's a guy who could fall, supposedly, like you were saying.
I mean, Central Scouting did not move him. They ranked him third. They ranked him the second forward after Celebrini. And he had a really strong first half. I mean, he projects to be a dominant number one center. The issue is not only just the injuries, but, if you're a number one center in the WHL in a season where guys were hitting 60, 50 goals and 70, 80 assists, you would expect that kind of at least this is the way the questions that I ask myself is, wouldn't you think a number one center or a potential franchise center would average more than an assist a game at a league in a league like the WHL where offense was and when you watch him play, he's a phenomenal stick handler. He's very quick. He's got length. He's got a wonderful array of moves and shots to beat you, but he doesn't really exploit the middle with his passing. Very rarely. It was weird. I was like waiting for it. Sometimes he played with the kid Basha, who is a playmaker himself as a winger, but I wasn't seeing like what Catton does or what Celebrini does or what Hellenius. Hellenius had the highest assist per game average by a first-year eligible in Finland since Barkov. It was 11 years ago. If you're looking for, like, I want my centers to make everybody around them better, the argument with Lindstrom is he does it with his stick handling and his puck protection and his size, but not with his playmaking, unless, he has something changes and when he's healthy, because he had a hand injury too. So maybe that impacted his passing. I don't know.
Right. Gotcha. So there's a controversy around Connolly because of his past behavior. And of course, it didn't show very well at the recent tournament where he took a penalty that probably cost the United States a gold medal in the game versus Canada. Is that going to haunt him and drop him a little bit, or is that just?
Yeah, I don't think that the penalty will drop him. I think he was going to drop anyway. I ranked him. When I rank kids, maybe it's just I like giving kids a second chance, especially when they make and this was same with Barzal. We heard Barzal had an attitude problem and he was cocky, but with the thing with Connolly is that he's come out and apologized like excessively, like continuously about what he did, and whether it's a PR thing that his agent is behind and the family's paying a lot of money because they want to save his image. This isn't the NFL. You got drafted 45th. You're going to get the same ELC that the kid getting second overall is going to get. So I don't think though it's going to be enough. I'm projecting him. I'm banking on him maturing, fixing whatever issues he might have. If he's a bad teammate, he's been labeled a bully, etc. At the same time, it's a results-based industry. Blake Wheeler was a bully to Patrick Laine while he was putting up 80, 90 points in a season. And Winnipeg was going to a conference final. So again, it's one of those things, but I don't see him going in the first round. If he goes in the first round, it's going to be late. Maybe a winning team that could take a gamble, or a team that has gutted their farm system and has no choice, and they need an elite talent. But teams that have had a history of some PR issues in the past, I wouldn't touch them. And that's how life works. You know, like, you can apologize all you want until you prove the doubters wrong and show that you've changed. But to wrap it all up, like the penalty, listen, I'm not trying to excuse what he did, but there's part of me that thinks he was trying to maybe change the momentum of that period. That Team USA was playing terribly, and they were winning 3-2, but Canada was dominating, USA was dominating 32-11 in shots heading into that period. And then the tide turned, and the goalie wasn't playing that well. So I think the intent behind the hit was to change the momentum, not to be, selfish. And I'm seeing that being thrown around there. But the poor kid, I guess, cried in the locker room. He was apologizing to everybody, and doesn't give the team gold. But overall, I think that where there's smoke, there's fire. It's up to him to change the narrative. But he probably won't be a first-round pick if he is very late.
Gotcha. Dan?
So I always like looking at who some of the, quote unquote insiders have the Flyers taking, because, when they took Cutter Gauthier, there were a couple guys. I think Bob McKenzie had them taking Cutter Gauthier, and I was like, who is this? Because he'd shot up the rankings so late in the season, and you just kind of had heard that they were interested in him. Now, I think that this Flyers regime is much more tight-lipped than the past regime, where they probably, found out via Chuck Fletcher that they were really interested in Cutter Gauthier. But Craig Button had a name that I hadn't seen a lot as a guy the Flyers were going to take, and it was Jet Luchenko. And so I was just curious what your thoughts were on him, because he's been, in the 30s, and I've seen him creeping into the 20s, but going as high as 12, I hadn't seen until Craig Button's list. So I was just curious on your insights on him.
He's a character guy. He's a jack of all trades. He's quick. He was the best player on his team. And so I think that if you're looking for now, he didn't have a great U18 Worlds. I don't know if that's going to impact his ranking at all. I have him at 26. But again, it's one of those things where, we saw last year with Easton Cowan going to the Maple Leafs. Nobody had Easton Cowan as a first-round pick. And if they did, it was probably just more of a gamble than anything. It wasn't like, let's look at the body of work. Absolutely, this kid screams first-rounder. And Easton Cowan, I think he was the OHL MVP this year. I mean, he was Denver Barkey as well is another guy that exploded this season. So I think if the Flyers are looking for that character identity, if they foresee Tortorella as the coach for the next few seasons, and maybe he is the guy to lead them to the promised land, for lack of a better term, that a guy like Luchenko, he sets the right example. He just does. I mean, he could score. He's got a really good wrist shot. A lot of these kids could score and have good wrist shots. A lot of these kids can pass the puck. With Luchenko, though, it's the versatility, the character, he kills penalties, and he takes face-offs. So on my mock draft, I have him going to Detroit at 15 because they, I could see him, at least one or two teams. They don't care. Because one thing to keep in mind about this draft, too, is that it's the usual suspects. It's the same teams drafting high again and again. New Jersey's there again. Ottawa's there again. Buffalo's there again. Anaheim, San Jose. It's the same teams. So a lot of these teams, they're loaded at every position, and you run the risk of blocking kids, really elite kids being blocked or getting outplayed, and then their confidence is shot, and you got nothing out of them. So in that case, you might see teams get a little cute and say, you know what, let's go for need or let's go for culture change. And that's when guys like Luchenko, Marek Vaneker, the kid Solberg, and the Norwegian defenseman, you might see them shoot up.
Gotcha. I was thinking the way you were describing it, there has been so many rumors the last couple of seasons about Scott Lawton. He sounds like a Lawton kind of player, in that he does so many things. He can play different positions, but he's a coach's favorite, and he's someone that you can build some kind of culture around. So maybe more of like that second pick in the first round, but not number 12.
Yeah, the thing is though, when you watch, well, listen, there have been reaches before where everybody is like, I mean, look at the Chinikov pick that Columbus made. He was an overager, and they took him. No one knew on the TV knew who he was, and he had a great season this year for considering his role on a bad team. And so I think, if you watch the OHL broadcast, every time Luchenko plays, they say really, really nice things about him. Not just the home broadcast, but the away broadcast. So if the announcers are saying those things, chances are the scouts are saying those things. And, if that happens, then you're looking at a kid that could go a lot higher than people expect.
Gotcha, Chef.
Okay, there's a decent amount of teams that have a couple first rounders, a couple second rounders. In fact, over the next couple of years, there's about 3 or 4 teams that have a lot of draft capital that might be able to work a deal with either the Flyers or each other or somewhere along the line. Do you see any of these? I mean, in particular, is there any team that stands out, goes, wow, they got this, they can really trade their picks away and make a deal and get somebody in there solid? Is there any surprises in that respect that we might see in the first round?
You talking about in terms of trading up?
Yeah, or just trading, like getting rid of some dudes for a big name, like you hear stuff about Toronto, that Marner's not happy, or they're not going to keep him, they can't afford it, or whatever, stuff like that. Like, there's just some teams that are going, I'll give you 2 firsts and a draft, whatever, you know what I mean?
Unfortunately, though, the cap has ruined the fun of the draft. Like you don't you don't see people trading in and out of the first top 10 anymore. I know that Chicago a couple of years ago was pretty busy. So we do see we have seen trades. So you got Calgary, Montreal, Ottawa, Philly, Chicago, San Jose. They all have the extra picks. And
Calgary,
I would say
Calgary too, right?
Yeah, they're some of those teams have been terrible for a very long time. But other teams like Calgary, I think Philly to a degree, either they're right there, and so why not? But again, a lot of it I think has to do with the general manager's view on assets, and does he view his draft picks as untouchable, like some GMs have in the past, whereas others are like, I don't care. Personally, I would say San Jose with the 14th pick. That is a very valuable pick. I know that they paid a lot to get Erik Karlsson. It essentially cost them Tim Stutzla to get Erik Karlsson. And now you trade Karlsson and get that first round pick back. It's still a top 14 pick, but they've been bad for 5 years. They've never missed the playoffs for more than 3 years straight. Now it's going on 5. They're the worst team in the league. They're terrible. Maybe Mike Rear's like, I'm getting Celebrini. I have all these prospects that I got the last couple of years. Why not trade it for an established player? But the problem is always to the cap, is taking salary back. Does it fit? Does the player want to go? Everybody's got no trades and no move clauses now. So ideally, yes, all these teams would say, especially like Montreal with the extra pick and Chicago, like they've been bad. Improve, get an NHL caliber play. There's going to be, but we're not really seeing it all that often. So I do think we'll see movement. I think in the Flyers case, unless they could trade both to move higher, which is always something to talk about, because again, like I said, a lot of these teams have been here already. They've been drafting in the top 10 annually. So maybe they're like, you know what, I want, give me, let's say Bobby Brink. I'm throwing a name out there, and your pick, and we'll swap places or something like that. But there'll be activity, there'll be trades, and maybe this year more than in the past because of all these teams are repeat.
And the cap's going up too.
And the cap's going up. Exactly. Good point.
Right. So the other thing is that the Flyers are at a point with a couple players if you check out the hazardous website called Cap Friendly, that little private inside joke there, that they have to make the decisions on. Scott Lawton's been in the rumor mill for a couple of years running. I mentioned him earlier. They have to pay Travis Konechny at some point. Are they that desperate for a number one defenseman or that center, just even a number two center, where instead of trying to get that player in a player for player deal, they try to move up in the draft and get in a position because they have a couple players that will meet some of those needs, perhaps. I mean, that's the only scenario I could see that happening. I don't think draft capital alone is going to get it done. That's just my opinion.
No, and on top of that, too, is that we're seeing teams like the UFA market is nowhere near what it used to be, where, you had Johnny Gaudreau a couple of years ago, but what teams are doing is that they're locking these guys up once they're acquiring them at the deadline. So like even Gensel, you're going to probably see him extended. Carolina has paid a heavy price in prospects to get him. So it's a shame that it's come to this, because in every other sport it seems like you have these major draft day deals, especially when teams are going to shed salary, especially like in the NFL, where you're shocked, like, oh my God, this guy got moved. But the Flyers, from their standpoint, is again, I don't know what their outlook is for next season. I don't know if they expected the success of this past season to come, I guess, as soon as it did. And now do they say, well, wait a minute, ticket sales were up, ratings were up, jersey sales were up, people were more interested. Like, do we double down on this, or do we stay the course? I know they say he's going to stay the course, but there's always ownership and things like that involved. So, again, I said the Flyers were going to stink this year. It was going to be embarrassing, and they were a nice story. So I'm not going to predict anything on what the Flyers are going to do in the future anymore.
Yeah, I know, Dan, I'll get to you in a second. Just and I'm harking back to what Dan talked about in terms of the Flyers doing a really good job of keeping things quiet and yet being resolute in sticking with the plan. But then you have Danny Briere out there last night on the AHL broadcast talking about how the Flyers are open for business and they know what their needs are. And you have a president in Keith Jones, who's a big believer of building from on the defense. And you have to wonder whether that construction is over, as you were speculating earlier, Dan.
Yeah, so, they've kept things very close to the vest. One of the Flyers reporters who's done a really good job of sort of breaking some of the news is Anthony DeMarco with the fourth period. And he had an article up today where he mentioned as a tidbit, like, don't be surprised if the Flyers are aggressive in trying to trade up to get another pick, in the top 14 or so, which would make sense because with such a, in a rebuild with sort of a closely packed 2 through 14, hey, maybe they'd want to get a forward and a defenseman. And so they have, they have all these assets as we've talked about. Even if Columbus moves their draft pick to next year, that means that next year the Flyers, I believe, have their first, Colorado's first, their second, and Columbus's second, which would potentially be 4 picks in the top 35, depending on how bad the Flyers are next year. And I think there's a chance they might take a step back. Is that something where you could see the Flyers kind of like trying to be aggressive and move up and maybe because Keith Jones might have different opinions on who they want than Danny Briere, and maybe they try and, satiate both guys. Is that, something that you could potentially see? They mentioned, actually, it was talking about maybe Buffalo's pick, which is, 13 or 14, that they might have interest in a guy like Scott Lawton, and maybe the Flyers could package like Florida's first round pick and Lawton to move up to number 13 or something like that.
It's 11, by the way.
11.
I'm being honest with you. If I'm going to put my GM hat on, if I'm Daniel Briere or Keith Jones, I'm trying to find a replacement for Gauthier. That as much as I like Jamie Drysdale, he's a defenseman. So there are centers. You can't hope for the centers to fall because history says they will. If we don't know what the Flyers scouts are thinking, and they're pounding on the table for somebody, well, some buddies, plural, people. So maybe they love Berkeley Catton, and they like that he's got that dog in him, but he's an elite playmaker, and he could kill penalties. Or maybe they love Hellenius, and they think he's the pure playmaker for all the snipers that the Flyers have in the system and up with the big club. So yes, like teams will also love these kids, and this is the art of the deal where it's like, all right, listen, we really want this kid. Name your price. I think the Flyers have the assets to do it. The problem is a lot of these GMs, these current GMs, I don't know if it's because they're on the younger side or the analytics are involved, but they are way more gun shy. We don't see movement into the top 10 anymore. We rarely see it. I think the last time a top 5 pick was moved was Fedotov, if I'm correct. Back in 2008, where he was that 5th overall pick went to like 9th. The Islanders had it, and they traded down like 3 times. You just don't see it anymore. But again, I think the other piece to it is how the draft unfolds. And so once names start flying off the board, let's say hypothetically that it's a run of defensemen, right? If it's a run of defensemen that go to, like, Chicago's like, we want a defenseman. Anaheim's like, we want a defenseman. We traded Drysdale, we want the righty. Columbus, defenseman. Salayev, whatever. Then you're going to look at the Flyers. Now, wait a minute now. Okay, now the centers are falling. We can make our move. Because, again, it could be a situation where a team like Montreal or, let's say, Utah or Ottawa was coveting those defensemen that went earlier than they expected. And now they're like, well, there goes our plan. And, like, maybe they're not infatuated with a guy like Hellenius or Catton or Lidstrom or, let's say, the Swedish kids. I don't know, Pettersson or Eriksson. So, that's the fun of watching the draft. It's fun talking about it. But the reality is we really don't know. These guys are so tight-lipped about it. But to wrap it all up, I, as a Flyer, if I was with the Flyers working as a scout, I'm like, let's get a center. We got to replace Gauthier. It should be imperative. And then they just weigh the costs.
Do you think it's necessarily that they need a center regardless? I do get the sense from what I've heard, they really did start to think that he was a winger, and having passed on Caulfield and passed on a natural and having to move on from a natural scorer like Gauthier, the real target, if they did get extra picks, or they might just say, hey, you know what? Yzerman is a pure scorer. He's going to be in a league. We passed on Caulfield. Gauthier is gone. We can't let him go by. We have so many problem scoring goals. Our power play sucks. We can't let him go off the board.
Yeah, that would be a very good pick. The fan base would buy it. Everybody would buy it. It wouldn't be something that you'd have to sell, with extra effort. It would be an easy sell job. That we just drafted the greatest goal scorer in NTDP history. If he's better than Cole Caulfield's career, if he had a better career than Cole Caulfield, then there's reason to assume he'll be a 30-goal scorer in the NHL. The only issue that I'd have with that is he doesn't do anything really else but score. So now do you say, well, all right, well, Tortorella in our play development, I'm going to have to make this kid into a more well-rounded player. But yeah, I mean, he helps power plays with that shot. I mean, he's Ovechkin light. He's parked in that circle. The opposite circle is a left shot, and he just hammers pucks on net, and he's accurate. He's got velocity. He's got release. He's got everything. And if he's scoring 1 goal every couple of games, who cares about that? He's not back checking. So again, this is part of the problem with assessing this. He was my number 1 in last April. I had a Celebrini, and within a matter of weeks into the season, I dropped him. The kid, I give the kid credit. He does not hide from the fact that he only likes scoring goals. He refers to himself in the third person. He's an interesting prospect. He's like, Cole Caulfield scores goals because that's what Cole Eiserman scores goals because that's what Cole Eiserman does, or something like that. It'll be a fun pick, to be honest with you.
Yeah, no doubt about that. So we got a request from a fan to get your opinion about another young prospect, Beckett Seneke, if I'm saying that right.
Yeah.
Is this a guy who's real close to your top 15?
Yeah, Seneca. I got him at 17, but my rankings never really mean that I'm like down on a kid. It just means I like a lot of kids and I can't rank them all top 10. So Seneca's a kid who was in my preseason top 15 or 16, maybe a little bit lower in the early high 20s. This kid is a fast power forward with skill, right? So he's a great stick handler. He's a dangler. He's playing right now. Actually, I forgot who got Oshawa was playing North Bay in the semifinals, and I forgot. I think Oshawa won Game 7, but I don't think he was in the lineup. But he is almost like a unicorn, where the kid could stick handle for days. I mean, he's got long reach, he's got size, and he's got the quick feet. So you really can't get the puck from him. And if it's a chip and chase kind of a game, neutral zone is clogged, he'll deliver big hits. So he played on a pretty good team. So I think that's why his numbers aren't like explosively good. I think he was more like just about a point a game. Whereas if he was on a team that had less support and he had to, let's say, play 25 minutes a game like most of these top junior kids do, you'd probably see more gaudier stats. But yeah, I'm a fan, huge fan.
Yeah, that sounds like an appealing player. I mean, if you had to take a list of what the Flyers' needs are, definitely 1 or 2C, the top pair of defensemen, and a power forward, because that's another element of the power play. Now, this kid seems like more of a stick handler than a guy who plays in a tough area. But at 6'3",
he plays in a tough area. He's such a good stick handler. It's almost like his line kind of like relies on him to do it. Well, not the only guy in his line to do it, but he can do it. And he's checked all the boxes that you'd want out of a draft year kid. He's on a winning team. He produces. He has intangibles. So he's one of those kids where I could see him being a top 10 pick.
Yeah, he's right-handed, but he plays on the left wing. That's also appealing to this franchise. He's 6'2", 180. That's I could definitely see him.
He's got to pack on some more muscle, but I mean, he will eventually.
Yeah, he's already. I mean, he's got the frame for it. That's most of the battle. So, all right. So, drum roll here. If you had to guess at 12, and you anticipated other teams, you said you did a mock, and if you mentioned it earlier and I missed it, and all the names flying around, who do you think the Flyers are probably going to pick? Or if you want to bring it down to like maybe 2 or 3 players to, play it safe.
Okay. So I don't think they're going to go with a defenseman with their first pick, unless, because I think all the elite guys are going to be gone, except for one. And that's a right shot guy, Yakimchuk. So I don't think the Flyers are going to just keep piling on the right side after drafting Bonk and trading for Drysdale. So I think they assess this draft like everybody else, where like you could find the Shea Weber in the second round, you could find a Duncan Keith in the second round, etc. So I think they're going to target forward. The guy that I have falling is Lindstrom. I really do think that he has franchise potential, even if he doesn't have the assist numbers. That's just something that the Flyers, because he could play a power game and he could score goals. It's almost like, I don't want to do this because I hate comparing kids to a guy that just got traded, but he has like a similar skill set to Cutter Gauthier. That Gauthier, he was a good passer with the NTDP. I never considered him an elite setup man or an elite passer. No. And we even saw at the World Juniors too, and even with BC, like he could be inaccurate with his passes, Gauthier. So but the shot and the release are very similar. And then I think Lidstrom has like the leadership traits. I think he has that attitude, not really on a Gauthier level, but he kind of exudes that confidence that he could be a top guy. So if he falls and he's there for the Flyers, you got to take him. If not, if he goes early, then I wouldn't risk overdrafting the Swedish centers like Pettersson and Eriksson, because they're not big, and even though one of them he's kind of like Elias Lindholm, and that's the Eriksson kid. I don't know if I'm going to get him at 12. The kid that I would target would be Hellenius. That what this kid did with his playmaking, and he's a tough kid. He's not big, but he's tough. He plays a two-way game. Maybe people soured on him because he didn't carry Finland to a medal at the when they hosted the U18 Worlds, but he was big in the playoffs for Ukraine. He was actually pretty good in some showings for the men's national team. So I'm looking at centers not just for need. I really like the wings that the Flyers have. When I'm looking at the Flyers 5 years down the road, I want them to have a legit number one center, a guy that the other teams have to plan for, that they're scared of, and he's going to beat you in a lot of ways. So if the Flyers, let's say, continue this upward trend, and they've been improving each of the last two seasons, then you're probably not going to be picking that high again. Even if they gut the team, if Torts is coaching and you have two really good goalies, a third if you count the other kid Kolosov, then the Flyers are going to be competitive and they're not going to be drafting in the top 5 or top 10. So it goes back to the trade piece. If they have the chance to trade up or to grab an elite center, you got to do it, because there are elite centers in the 25 draft, 26 draft, plenty of them. But I don't think the Flyers are going to be there unless they get lucky with a trade with that's unprotected pick or something. But so my order would be Lindstrom first if he's available, Hellenius second, and then if Catton, if they could somehow, Catton's not going to slip. There's no way. I mean, he's a special talent. But again, trade up, defensemen dominate the top half of the top 10. Flyers can make a move. We'll see. But those are the three guys I'm targeting.
Dan.
Yeah, no, I was just going to say it seems like there's so much variance because a couple of the projections I saw today actually have Catton slipping to where the Flyers are. And I've seen a couple people mention that they think that his lack of size compared with some people think he has a somewhat lack of foot speed or straight line speed, that those two things could result in him slipping. And a lot of folks have got Caden Lindstrom going like 4.5 because of his size, but then other folks have got him going later. It seems like there's just so much uncertainty. And Catton's a guy who I saw him, I think it was Scott Wheeler with The Athletic today, had him slipping to the Flyers pick. And I would be, that would be, I think, ideal. I mean, except for the fact that the Flyers have sort of already got a bunch of undersized forwards. But I mean, could you theoretically see a guy like that slipping because of the size concerns?
Well, last year I say no, not anymore. And the reason why is I think Tyler Benson, Zach Benson, really, I'm not going to say he made people look stupid because we don't know what the other picks are going to turn out to be that were picked ahead of him. But Benson on pure talent and bite and speed, everything. I love that kid. I had him ranked 5th overall, and he fell because of size. There was he had no red flags. He was a phenomenal player. He outperformed Savoy and Geeky, who are the older picks on that team. So I think that if teams do their homework, like, wait a minute. All right, I get size is important. Look at Florida, look at Boston. I get it's important, but do we really want to risk? And Barzal wasn't the biggest guy, and they were knocking his character, and he was cocky in the interviews, and Boston passed on him 3 times. And he's, clearly one of the best playmakers in the game. So I would hope that teams have the analytics staff, hopefully, would tell the scouts, no, we're not going to do this anymore. That, look at Panarin. First of all, foot speed, look at Panarin. That guy can't skate. That guy's never an open ice. If he's an open ice, it's because he got lucky. He is a deliberate, methodical scorer. He does everything at his own pace, and he lights people up. So I've really graduated away from the skating knock. Look at Mark Stone. That guy could barely move. And he had a break. Remember the breakaway goal he scored last year in the playoffs? That guy can't move. And he's getting breakaway goals. So the hockey IQ and the vision and the anticipation is way more important to me, and that's why I don't see Catton slipping. But then again, it's just I can't say that it's an impossibility because it's just that year. So it's that kind of year.
Yeah, it's almost like a cat and mouse game, right?
It usually is. I mean, last year was nuts because we're like, yeah, we know who the first 4 picks are going to be. Let's move on. We knew what it was going to be, and that's definitely not going to be the case this year.
Yeah, definitely. Well, Chef, do you have any final ones for Steve?
Well, I will say this. I think I brought it up in a text to you guys. When did we lose the ping pong balls? It seemed like COVID took away the fun of the draft. Now it's like I feel like I'm going to I guess remember when a kid they checked your hearing and they showed you the flashcards. Can you hear this? And here it's the Flyers at 12, and then I missed that fun with the ping pong balls. Maybe it's the kid in me, but all of a sudden we blink. Maybe COVID took it away because everything. It seemed like you could look at the draft the other night and then look at it during COVID, and it could have been the same draft because everybody was like zooming it in from like the thing. I kind of miss the old days. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm misremembering. Maybe it's a Mandela effect that all these ping pong balls were out there and it was exciting to see them pick them live, But other than that, what the hell happened, guys?
No, I think they had some screw ups or things that were somewhat maybe considered hinky with the ping pong balls, and they just stopped doing it.
Because totally hiding the whole draft is very not hinky at all. When it got down to, come on, tell me.
I don't know if you guys remember, but I paid attention to this every year. They had a guy. He was a young man, probably like in his late 20s. And he held the box. It looked like Darth Vader's control box, but he held it in his hand. And he was looking at the machine when he was pressing the button to release the ball. I'm like, you can't do that. You can't do that. If this guy was like a friggin' ex-CIA sniper, he could see what the ping pong ball logo was on, and he could have said, "Oh, So I think they received a lot of complaints about that this guy could have been like a paid agent. And then the last time he did it, he was sweating profusely. So they got rid of that. And then I think it was the COVID one where the Maple Leaf ball was about to go up. And I think the Ranger ball or some other ball hit it out, and the Ranger ball went up for Lafreniere. I think that might have been the last time we saw it. But yeah, it's, it was boring. It was so anticlimactic. It was like you knew it was going to happen. You just have Daly with the card, and I had it on mute. Well, I didn't even really listen to what they said.
Well, come on, tell me when it came down to it last night, and you saw that when it was the top 2 picks were left. Tell me you weren't going, oh frick! I could hear half the country going, if freaking Chicago wins again, there's going to be hell to pay. There was going to be a revolt. So I mean that's a reason. I used to love the draft, and I thought it was fun. I just think they took the magic out of the draft now. So I mean the draft lottery, I should say.
Yeah, well, I mean, we'll wait until they do the draft with none of the teams there. They're going to do it like the NFL. Does that start this year? How the teams all get together, the personnel, everybody's
no more. No, the draft in Vegas is the last time they have the tables and
the sphere, right?
Right, but they're going to all get together this particular draft, and then from then on, it's going to be like the NFL, which is, I think, a big mistake.
Well, the problem is that here's the problem that I had. The problem that I had with the tables is day 2. Because they would have a microphone at the table and the GMs would just run off picks. And it's like, there's no time for analysis. You can't catch your breath. What they really should do, if they're going to copy the NFL, is to break it down into 3 days. So you have round 1, Then on to day 2 is 2 and 3. The other problem is the free agency is the next day or like 2 days later. So I don't agree with anything that they do. I've always complained about the NHL. So like, when they change something, I'm like, all right, whatever. But, for someone like myself who tries to know every pick that gets drafted, you get on the second day, you get maybe an analysis on 1 out of every like 7 kids picked.
Yeah.
All the way up until pick 225. And it's frustrating. With the NFL, you don't get that. You get analysis and video and commentary on every pick from 1 to the end. So maybe it changes. I don't
know. Yeah. Well, Steve, if people want to find your work, where can they get that? And when can they anticipate your master draft guide in anticipation of the June 28th and 29th draft? That's when it's going to be held. Give us some information there, and people can contact you too.
Well, thank you. The website is thedraftanalyst.substack.com. So just go to Substack and type in the Draft Analyst. I have the free. I just released a mock draft, 32 pick mock draft. So that's up right now if you want to check it out. The draft report is basically an ongoing thing. It's not going to be released. At least I'm hoping it's not going to be released the week of the draft. Hopefully a little earlier this year. But if you subscribe to my Substack, the draft report comes with the subscription. So it's $5 a month. If you subscribe, you get a free link to the PDF. You download it, and that's that. So, but for the next release will be the rankings. And then from there, we're going to cover the Memorial Cup. We're going to cover the Men's World Championships, if any draft prospects are there. And then recap the major leagues, like the Russian leagues, recap the Canadian Major Junior League, recap the USHL until we lead up. So I think I have one more mock draft to go. I'll wait until the conference finals are set. That way the draft order doesn't get all crazy and out of hand. But Substack is where you'll find me.
Fantastic. In fact, we just on our Twitter account, we just retweeted your info, or actually the article, posted that one from the one you talked about with the mock. So
all right, appreciate it.
Yeah, no problem. So, and you're also at the Draft Analyst on the app formerly known as Twitter?
Yes. I'm not as busy on Twitter like I used to be, but most of my work is through the Substack. Yeah.
Gotcha. Steve, thanks so much for coming on, and maybe we'll catch you right around draft time. Maybe we'll do a post analysis, but definitely want to have you on again soon.
Absolutely. Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Steve.
You got it.
Thanks, Steve. Great shot.
Right, take care.
Right. Take care. Thank you.
Bye.
Okay. So, gents, let's get some feedback about that. And then we have to cover some housekeeping items with the Flyers, because there is some Flyers news to talk about that will affect, that may affect the draft, who they take, because there's some deals out there on the table, a lot of speculation. Some of it's kind of shaky. Well, let me see. Let's start with the Michkov Fedotov tie-in. Now, since our last show, and it's been a while, I think it's been about 2.5 weeks, because we need some time off after the season. Fedotov signs for $3.25 million. That means combined, the Flyers will spend for the 2 years that both him and Samuel Ursan are signed, will spend $4.7 million at that position for the NHL club, which is not bad. Now, here's the thing. Everybody said, well, that's a lot of money for a guy who's coming over at an advanced age. And is there anything more to this? And I was listening to Anthony Sanfilippo say that Fedotov's agent is the same as Michkov's agent. And one of the ways in which Michkov the skids might be greased for him to come over here sooner. It's not the only factor, but maybe one factor could be the idea that they were going to pay Fedotov and motivate the agent to be someone who could be helpful in the process, if by some chance that was possible. So that might have gone into the number with Fedotov. Plus, it was kind of why he came over when he did as well, after everything he's been through. So there's more on Michkov. And Dan, you have really been on top of this. We know he was photographed recently wearing his Flyers hockey shirt, deadlifting, and people ran away like, okay, he's deadlifting with this Russian, conditioning coach. But there's a little bit more going on that Appleyard talked about in terms of a little bit more laxity with some of these prospects to maybe leave early. What do you got with that?
Yeah, I mean, so Alex Appleyard posted an article that was a translation from an interview, I think, with the SKA St. Petersburg CEO or owner.
Medvedev, yeah.
Yeah, Medvedev. And it was sort of hinting at the fact that he knows that Michkov's interested in coming over to North America and that SKA has a great relationship with the Philadelphia Flyers and that a decision would likely be made in June. Now, assuming that this translation is correct, we all know that Michkov wants to come over here, right? It's no secret. I mean, you can just see how he was at the draft. His father died in Russia, last year. I'm sure he wants to get out of there, him and his family. And he's under contract for the next 2 seasons. People were speculating maybe he could get out of that contract after next season. So I don't think any Flyers fans are really expecting there even to be an inkling of hope that he could be here for this coming season. So this is a major development. The fact that Medvedev is saying they're going to decide in June if he could come here this year, and just leaving the door open like that, I think provides a lot of optimism for Flyers fans. And then, Michkov is on Instagram doing deadlifts in his Flyers outfit. So, at this point, I think I think there's a relatively decent shot that this could actually happen. We'll see, but it sure seems like there's a possibility he could be in the opening night lineup, which would be incredible and brings in a horde of additional questions. We were thinking he might be coming over here closer to a finished product at the age of 21, 22. He's not a finished product yet. This year he was pretty good, but he had a lot of issues with the pneumonia. So, does it accelerate the rebuild if it happens? A lot of different questions, but I think the important thing is just the possibility that it might actually occur.
Yeah, I mean, our good buddy Kevin Dursa was talking about a scenario where they could let him go and they could see that he needs more work. But he's now in the Flyers organization. But instead of assigning him to the AHL, then they would send him back to the KHL. And that would change the entire dynamic of the situation, where he would get another season of experience. And that would kind of make everybody happy in that, yeah, okay, let's see if he's ready for the NHL. But now he's being designated for assignment to a KHL club that originally had his rights. And it's something that enhances the relationship and the spirit of cooperation between the Flyers and that team. So we'll see. I wouldn't count on it for this year, but you never know. Chef, you want to weigh in?
Yeah, well, I was just going to say, remember when they got rid of Quitter Gauthier, we didn't hear a damn word about it. There was nothing leaked. When he came over, when Michkov came over and viewed Voorhees, we didn't hear a word of it. So
and Fedotov,
the fact that we're actually hearing stuff about this makes me wonder if they're also trying to kind of get us all fired up, and maybe they're working something with the hopes that maybe public opinion will sway something too. I just think that there's, as Dan has said before, when they were talking about when the Flyers were, negotiating this past season on trades and stuff, and they were talking about other players and talking about stuff, they were very, very specific when they said stuff. So they were very intentional in their words. And so it wouldn't surprise me in the least bit if they had something cooking. We didn't know about it, and this is them kind of like preparing us a little bit anyway.
It could be. We'll have to see. The other major story and issues that were brought up surrounded Sean Couturier. Now, we know that he hired an agent, Pat Brisson, who's just as big a mover and shaker in the league as there is. And he was actually, when Daniel Briere was a player, he was Danny's agent. So the talk from the Flyers side was that this will prevent maybe some of the communication problems. And the other guy, Lupien, who was actually like a junior partner of an ex-agent of Couturier, who Tortorella referred to as Pissant. So the Pissant is gone. And now we have Pat Person, who is anything but a Pissant. But then today, we have the release of the article from the fourthperiod.com, our buddy Anthony DeMarco, talking about, now there's a little bit more to this, maybe from the Couturier side, and that there's a possibility he might have been brought in to facilitate at least looking into a trade. Like Coots really got turned off by this, and it's a possibility that both sides might want a separation. It doesn't sound like it's something they're totally committed to, but I think the word was explore. So one of the names came up that was written about was Calgary, and they are saddled with a horrible contract with, boy, I hate to say the name, Jonathan Huberdeau, who was really a star in Florida, gets traded in the Matthew Tkachuk deal that really elevated the Panthers to a different level. And Huberdeau is like produced about the same number of points in 2 seasons as he had in 1 season in Florida. So he's basically become like a 55-point player after having 105 points in 1 year in Florida. And it's just not working out. But he's $27 million more in compensation. And his deal has a longer term. So what I'm talking about is Couturier goes to Calgary. For some reason, the Flyers take on Jonathan Huberdeau, and there'd have to be some kind of sweetener. Dan, can you help me make this make sense?
About potentially moving Couturier?
Yeah.
I mean, here's the question that I asked when the scratching happened, because it didn't make any sense to me. You literally named this guy captain, and then he actually started playing a little bit better. He was lulling, and they were playing him, and then he started playing a little bit better, and then they scratch him. He's clearly irate. I mean, you watch the interview with him; he was very unhappy. He's saying he didn't talk to the coach. Tortorella. The whole thing was very strange. But here's what I had heard from a pretty good source was that one of the reasons that they scratched him and one of the reasons they were concerned about him was his lack of foot speed, right? So my comment was his lack of foot speed is not going to improve as he gets older. It's just going to get worse. So if they're worried about his lack of foot speed, then they've got him signed for another, whatever it is, 8 years, 7 years. Like, this is not going to turn out well. And a guy with back issues, that's not going to get better either. It's just going to get worse. So yeah, the contract was, insane. I sort of questioned it at the time because of his history of knee injuries.
Yep.
And so, I mean, if you gave me the two possibilities of trading him to a team and getting a decent return and like eating half of his salary for the next 8 years, I would take that over getting Jonathan Huberdeau, who seems like kind of a dog to me. And he's signed for more money than Couturier and more years than Couturier. So I don't really want
too. Yeah.
Same age. I don't really want Jonathan Huberdeau on this team. If you're going to try and move Couturier, I would try and retain half of his salary and try and get something of value for him if you can. But making it make sense is I don't think that the Fletcher regime is the one that signed him. And I think this group kind of looks at him a little bit differently. Even though they made him captain, which is insane to me.
That's the thing. It's like Danny's the one who took him in when he was a rookie, right? And he lived with Briere. So and Danny's the one that scrambled over to Snow the goalie and talked about, oh, well, Sean's battling 5 injuries, and I'm not, not including the back. His back is fine, and he was really covering for Sean. And it was obviously a divide. At this point, it's like, don't try to whiz on my knee and tell me it's raining. There was clearly a divide in the opinion of Briere and Tortorella with this. And it's the first time they've had a real communication F-up, and that's just what it is. So, yeah, they're stuck with Couturier unless they're willing to eat like half the salary. And it's going to have to be a team. And I think Anthony was talking about in the article, someone has to believe that he's going to have at least 3 years at a third line center level. And if you could get him for, because right now, I got the wrong page. Couturier is making, it's 7 something.
7, 8 or something, 7, 8, 8, 5 or something like that.
No, it's not that expensive. It's 775. Well, you were close. Yeah. So, oh boy, yeah.
Well,
boy.
I mean, look,
for three,
if you're kind of
or
stuck
whatever,
with it, you're kind of stuck with it. So right now, you just got to get ahead of it and make the best of it. We're stuck with it for now. Whatever it is, you got to deal with it. If he's your third line center, he's your third line center. You got to work around it. No sense. The plan is right now, if you can't move it and you can't eat half of it to move it, then you got to have a plan going forward to work around it. But he's definitely, I can't have him on my 2 top lines then if that's the case. And I know it's a hell of a lot of money to eat on your third line, but in this case, you got to swallow it and say, you know what, I ain't got no choice unless I pay, $4 million for somebody to take him. So you got to just move on and go to the next thing and address it. And when this filters out, it filters out.
Yeah. Moving on to another item I thought was really interesting that applies to the Flyers was that the former Arizona, now Utah Hockey Club, and frankly, unless they're going to name them the Utes or something like that, I would stick with Utah Hockey Club. It's so bad. Some of the names coming out there are so amateurish, like the Yeti and all. Oh, it's awful. Well, anyway, Utah has virtually no defensemen under contract. And if you're looking for a team that might be interested in Ristolainen, if the Flyers wanted to lose salary, like if they were going to take on Huberdeau, I'm only kidding. But the Flyers literally, I mean, Utah literally has only 3 defensemen that are going to be RFAs, and Joshua Brown and Travis Dermott are going to be UFAs. That is could be a landing spot if the Flyers wanted to move on from the salary of Ristolainen. And they have some very interesting forwards. Although it might be considered a salary dump, but there's a need there. So a lot of it is the value is in the market between each teams. But on the other hand, you could say the Flyers could use Risto Snarl back on that blue line. I'm not sure, but that's going to block kids. This is the divide, guys, because if Michkov even gets a sniff here next year, that's got to change to what they're going to do. And they have to get some kind of young center in here. From what I'm hearing, Morgan Frost has been on the trade block like for the last year. He's constantly on the trade block, even now. It's like they'll take him back, but if someone comes up with a decent offer and the Flyers have a replacement, they'll move him. There's not going to be any hesitation there because he's not Torts' kind of player, or he's just not in their long-term plans. Dan?
Which is wild because they don't have any centers. Like they don't have any centers, and they want to trade away the one center who was pretty consistent throughout the course of the season because John Tortorella doesn't like him. I mean, it's just, I don't know. It's the whole Frost thing is just insane to me. I don't know if we talked about it before, and there've been lots of rumblings about Joel Farabee. Of course, I hadn't bought a Flyers jersey in 7 years, and I finally buy one this year, and it's Farabee, just because I'm thinking to myself, man, Farabee's had a pretty good year, and he seems like the kind of guy who could become a leader. And then, of course, oh, no, he's the winger that we're going to move because we committed all this money to Owen Tippett and we're going to sign Travis Konechny. And, but yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if they move Joel Farabee for a center. You know, again, if Zegras doesn't like Morgan Frost, you think he's going to like Zegras? Like, this is what I don't understand.
You mean that Tortorella doesn't like Morgan Frost?
Yeah, if Tortorella doesn't like Morgan Frost, he's going to like Zegras? I mean, come on. Let's be honest. I don't.
Yeah, but I don't think Tortorella is here after this year. I honestly don't.
Well, then maybe Briere should just try and keep Morgan Frost around until. But if Tortorella's not here, he's going to be in the front office, also trying to, get changes.
It's going to be different, though. Yeah, I think it's going to be different.
Yeah.
I really do.
But yeah, no, I think Farabee they'll try and move. Frost they'll probably try and move, and they'll try and upgrade at center. If Steve's rankings are correct, that would be huge for the Flyers because I guarantee you they covet a big, strong center like Hayden Lindstrom. Everything I'm seeing, I don't think Hayden Lindstrom's going to last to their pick because people like big, strong centers. So, we'll see about that. But yeah, I think it's going to be a pretty wild offseason, actually.
Yes.
Yeah.
Agreed.
Definitely. So just recapping that the draft is on June 28th and 29th. And then, like Steve said earlier, that free agency begins on July 1st. I don't expect the Flyers to be major players. I like what they did last year, picking up, character guys.
Yeah.
So that's about it. But again, that could, I don't see them doing much. But I think everything they're going to do is going to be around the draft or through trades. And that's basically it. All right, gents. I think we're going to call it there. What is the last word from you, Chef, and let people know where they can find you on social media?
Okay, I'm going to say it because I said it last year, and I think the Flyers are going to do another three-way deal. I think it's going to be pretty significant. Could involve possibly the Ducks and the Utah Yeti or whatever you're calling them. The hockey club. I do like the way Utah Hockey Club sounds. It sounds pretty good, but very European football-ish. But let's just say, I think they're going to do something big like that. I think you'll see a three-way trade involving veterans and picks, and you'll see some stuff move around because I think it's going to be based on the fact that Michkov will be here sooner than everybody expected. So, and if you want to argue with me, fine. I love it. I love the good arguments. It's fun. So you can reach me at Chef to the left B on X, Chef to the left B on X.
You got it. The great Dan Silver. What's the final word?
Really good hockey matchups in the second round of the playoffs. I'm enjoying watching these playoffs. So I think the first round, for whatever reason, I wasn't able to get into a lot of the games or watch a lot of the games. I had some travel and stuff like that. I think that, the second round is going to be really exciting. So I went to sleep last night assuming that I was going to wake up and see Edmonton had won 6-1 against Vancouver. And I wake up and Vancouver won 5-4. I still have to watch the highlight. But it's just great. It's great. It's great hockey. So
you should see those goals he gave up.
Skinner. I'm so glad I traded away Stuart Skinner in my fantasy hockey league. And I actually traded him for Simone Nemitz from the Devils. It's a deep league. I actually will get into another episode, but I have picks. I have the first, third, and fourth picks in my draft because I'm in the middle of a rebuild. So I'm going to get Celebrini and some other guys. But anyway, I'm really having fun watching the hockey, and everyone should watch.
Ah, fantastic. And you can be found.
I can be found in my basement where I am right now, or online in the metaverse at dsilver88 on Twitter, X. Elon Musk.
You got it. And just a reminder, I have Colorado defeating Florida in the finals. Although I think Dallas is still going to be heard from. That's going to be a very long, fantastic series.
Yes.
Continuing that. Just the pace that Colorado could play at. The only thing that bothers me, it's like 4 or 5 guys are scoring. They got the overtime winner with Miles Wood, but asking the Chuchkin and Makar and McKinnon to just basically carry the whole team and hope and pray that Georgiev can make a stop. I don't know if that's going to get you the Stanley Cup, but we'll see. So just a reminder, the O&B Puckcast can be found on X at O&B Puck, at O&B Puck. And of course, you can find us on all the top podcast platforms. Please rate and subscribe. Give us a rating on Apple Podcasts in particular. You can, if you go over to Spotify, you can give us a 5-star if we deserve that. I think we've put in a good show tonight. We're also on iHeart, TuneIn, Amazon, Audible, Deezer. We have a YouTube page, plug in there, O&B Puckcast. And of course, we're on Facebook as well. And I guess that's it for tonight. So until next time, everybody, thanks for listening and take care.